Welcome to It's a Yes, Making It in Media, the podcast that really helps you get hired and stay inspired in the world of media sales. I'm Jo Wood, MD of the Media Exchange.
And I'm Debra Sharon, founder of Media Sales Training. Welcome to Series 2.
This series, we're on a mission to help you understand the major UK media channels from the inside out, so you can target the right roles, walk into interviews with confidence, and build a career in media sales you're truly excited about.
In today's episode, we're focusing on selling print and digital commercial solutions.
We're delighted to have a very special guest today. Joining us later on the episode is Cath Waller, who is MD Advertising at Immediate Media, and she's also chair of the PPA Magnetic Board.
We're going to be covering the big topics which are shaping print and digital sales right now, and we'll also be trying to answer your listener questions. If you've got something you want us to tackle, please do send it in to hello@makingitinmedia.com. and we could be featuring you in a future episode. If you want to get hired in media sales and stay inspired once you're there, you're in exactly the right place. So Jo, it feels like in 2026, the UK advertising market is in a real time of structural shift. It's not just about growth, because we know more and more money is being spent on advertising, but the way that money is being spent is changing all the time. Total digital ad spend has continued to rise, and about 57% of advertisers expect that their digital budgets will continue to grow. And we probably recognise that print as a media channel is in decline in terms of total spend. But today it'd be interesting for us to talk a little bit about the role of print and digital and how best to sell.
The story is a little bit more nuanced than digital wins and print loses. It's really all around trust and attention and measurability and cultural relevance, is really reshaping how the budgets are allocated across both channels.
How often are you recruiting for roles where a seller is expected to be competent in selling both print and digital simultaneously?
All the time. And to be honest, that's the good thing. It means that if you come from a print legacy background and you want to move into a digital space, there's something for you to learn, and vice versa. An awful lot of the roles that we deal with these days are what you would call real hybrid positions. I think anybody that thinks just selling print is the way forward is coming at it from an environment which is not going to safeguard their future.
Jo, we've got some questions from listeners around selling print and digital. Shall we look at those now?
Yes, that sounds like a plan. So we've had a great question come in from Emma in Bristol, who is currently interviewing for a role at a publisher that started in print but has gone fully multi-platform. Emma asks, does having a strong print heritage actually help a media owner win advertising budgets today? Or has the landscape moved so far that it's really all about the digital offering?
Somebody that I recently worked with was describing print as being, for a media owner, being like the trunk of the tree. And then all of the other platforms evolve from that print anchor. I thought that was quite a neat way of describing the power of a legacy print brand. I was reading yesterday about Cosmopolitan, Cosmo as we know it, Jo. How old do you think that brand is?
This is another one of those stats, Debra, that I don't know the answer, but I think you're going to tell me.
I love sounding so clever when I've just read something. But I was absolutely amazed to see that this year Cosmo is celebrating its 140th anniversary.
Wow.
The function of that publication has changed from being a platform for really academic authors and aspiring writers to then becoming the kind of magazine that we're familiar with now, that has evolved as a digital brand, as a video-based brand, as an events brand, as well as a publishing brand. So across over 140 years, very interesting to see how that brand remains constant, but it's been able to develop and evolve as society has changed and as the requirements of its audience have changed. So Jo, one of the biggest shifts that's happened, even on the Cosmo journey, is the difference between what was an advertorial in print and how that's evolved into a native solution, and the way that plays out in the digital space.
The term advertorial has changed to native advertising. In a digital space, it's now often partnerships or something similar to that. And the bottom line is, all it is a creative way to reach an audience and try and encourage them to buy whatever the product is. And I think it's so important that people remember that there are different words that describe things, but that doesn't mean it's complicated.
No, but this point about native is really interesting because unlike print, where you see it, if you pick up a magazine or a newspaper in its print format, the advertising is something that you probably quite enjoy. It's part of your reader experience. And that native word is the way in which advertising is surviving. Being able to endorse a brand through the voice of the creator of that digital content and enabling brands to really talk in the language of the rest of the surrounding content so that it's part of the user experience. And that feels like it's gone full circle back to the advertorial in print that was high yielding and really welcomed by a reader because it gave them more content that they were originally looking for. And it's also interesting to see how those brands have created what I'll call first-party data. So when done well, created databases of reader information, whether that's because people have entered competitions or they've entered applied for reader offers. Publishers of legacy brands have been able to build really direct relationships with their audience. And I think in 2026, that's become really powerful.
So it's interesting, isn't it, Debra, that a lot of what I would call the legacy print brands or print publishing companies, they have all been incredibly successful. And I would include, obviously, all of the main national newspapers in that too, in adding digital to their offering, evolving into events. Do you think that's making them much more attractive to future generations?
I think it's a survival strategy because it used to be the case that all of those companies would publish separate media packs and rate cards for their various different brands. So you'd have the print rate card and then you'd have the digital rate card. And actually, from an advertiser's point of view, that was almost offering them two different points of entry to your audience at different price points. And maybe what we're seeing now as a shift is an aggregation of those different audiences, and that sellers are going out into the market and saying, we can offer you access to this entire engaged audience. Some of that audience is consuming our content in print. Some of it is coming to the content digitally, and we can package that up for you in a creative and interesting way and make it easier for you to buy an integrated solution. I think John Lewis, both as John Lewis and Waitrose, have increased their investment in print to drive more traffic towards their online business. So that's a really good example of bringing the two things together. Even Microsoft have launched a print product recently. So that's the biggest digital giant thinking that actually they need to be talking in print when they're trying to convince organizations to advertise with them.
And we've had a really good question, Debra, from Jenny in London, who asks, how do you handle the measurement conversation when you're in front of a client or indeed in an interview? Yeah. What do you really talk about?
Well, I think it's really exciting now because traditionally print salespeople have been haunted by an advertiser that says, well, we can't measure the effectiveness of our spend with you. But now they're encouraging more and more advertisers, as you say, to embed a QR code or some kind of measurable device into the print ad so that there are ways of being able to evaluate what print is able to deliver. What I think is interesting is that some of the digital data is not that great. So if you think about when digital first started out, it was about click-through rates. And yet industry average click-through rate on a banner, any ideas, Jo?
No idea, Debra.
Well, 0.05%
Wow.
of an audience will bother clicking on an ad. So in terms of how effective that is as a measurable indicator of success, most people selling a digital solution will run a mile before they reveal what their click-through rate is.
There's a whole new language that's evolved relating to digital. Tell me about that.
Well, rather than give you my answer, I would just recommend the IAB website.
What does IAB stand for, Debra?
Internet Advertising Bureau. I think their jargon buster is really helpful and ever evolving. And if I was selling print, I'd be very happy with the language of that. But moving into digital, it feels like a whole new landscape.
So my takeout would be that the print part still brings trust and tangibility, physical attention, some cultural credibility, whereas digital is really much more about reach, targeting precision, real-time optimization, measuring that data effectively. And the whole thing together, it enables clients to have partners who can plan and deliver both things. What do you think?
Yeah, I think what you've clearly described is two different platforms doing two very different things, but both talking to the similar audience. And we all consume content in so many different ways that actually this combination is a powerful one.
Actually, in 2026, I don't think the answer is selling print or digital. It's selling an intelligent combination of both, backed by data, built for speed and measured properly. And I can't think of anyone better to tell us more about that than Cath, who is joining us today.
Lovely to be here. Thank you, Jo.
We wanted to ask you some interesting questions. Yeah. And the first of which is really around immediate's print heritage. Yeah. And how you've evolved the business. Did the heritage genuinely help the digital shift, or did it hold it back? Or how did you manage to move the business so far forward?
I think if you've got a really strong consumer brand that is really well known, I think it does help the transition. And I guess back in the day that was like print to web. Now it's more like, is it web to pod? Is it print to Apple News? What goes to video and to social, and like some of our content now starts with like a podcast, for example, and then goes across all the other platforms. Our view is you have to create content wherever the consumer is nowadays. I think it all starts with brand. What's the purpose of your content, regardless of platform?
Gen Z are not really interested in print products anymore, are
No.
they? Yeah. Do you actually think there'll be a time when no one will produce anything in print anymore?
It's a good question. Print has held up way better than anyone expected, I would say, both in terms of newsstand, in terms of subs, for sure. It's still a declining market, but the decline has happened way more slowly than anyone predicted. Some would argue in a world that is, going to become awash with AI-generated content, AI slop, fake influencers, all of that stuff, right? That actually the something like print becomes potentially more valuable. Then will there be a shift back to stuff that is more tangible, that is trusted? Gen Z a lot of them are turning away from social media, right? So does that offer an opportunity for brands? Possibly, but I think it will always still probably be in a more online format.
I mean, Cath, we had an interesting question from a listener who was kind of talking about how a business like media looks at growth, and whether it's about growing the scale of the audiences that follow your brands, or about building out those deeper relationships. So I was just interested to get your take on that, because it's obviously a very changed landscape, but what does growth look like?
You'd say it's a bit of both, right? And what one leads to the other, you would hope. But the way we look at it now is everything starts with engagement, because in the world that we're now in, you have to, if you want to build a media brand or retain one or grow it, you have to have a very strong direct relationship with consumers. You need to build on the power of your brand and the relationship that you have, the trust that you have with that audience, because if they can go anywhere else and get similar content, what's the reason to come to Good Food? What's the reason to come to Radio Times and all our other brands? And that's we say about two things, but it's absolutely about engagement. It's the type of content that you create that has to do one of two jobs. It has to like either really inspire and excite people and bring them joy, or it has to fulfill a very specific need that they can't get elsewhere. And if you follow those paths and provide really brilliant, exceptional content, whichever platform is the platform of someone's choice, and create content that fulfills those needs and excites them and inspires them, then they will have that direct relationship with you, which creates the deep engagement, which then ironically leads to the scale. Higher retention in an environment like ours, whichever platform it's on, the better people respond to advertising, the more they trust the adverts, the more they respond to them. It's contextual, it's trusted, and that halo effect that trusted editorial brands have. It's just that there's been a kind of a misalignment on that. And as an industry, we have been trying to do a better job trying to measure that and prove the effectiveness of it, because it's really important to do so.
As the quality of the engagement and the time spent, rather than the masses that you might be able to hit through something automated.
That links really well with the kind of launch of your experiential division, Cath. So for our listeners, first of all, what exactly is experiential? What is it that's made you think that that was the right next step? Yeah, and what do you think it's going to add to everything you're offering? I'm sure you've got some really good thoughts on that.
So we launched brand new this year. It's called IX. It came about because we've got sort of two sides to it. So we've got a really successful live business called I'm Live, which puts on, all of the massive Good Food Gardeners World live shows, over 300,000 visitors a year, etc. And then we've got our sort of really creative partnerships division, so our creative studio Imagine, that we launched 10 years ago this year. And where the consumers are moving is, especially with, too much social media, too many algorithms, too much time spent online, people are craving like real life experiences. So they crave something immersive and different and exciting, and something that lasts in the memory rather than your 2-second view of an ad on social. So we've been seeing more of a demand from advertiser partner brands to kind of say, what can you do to bring this concept to life when you're working on partnerships? So it felt like the right time. Consumers want it. Brands absolutely want to be associated with those live, memorable moments to achieve that standout.
Very interesting. So where does AI fit into all that you're talking about, Kath? Do you see it as something that is helping, hindering, changing the way that things operate? How does it fit? And is it going to replace all of your human beings at any point?
I guess there's two sides of it, right? It's the first side is, how are we using it as a business, right? We really lent into it really quite early days as a business and said, you can either sit on the sidelines and worry about this stuff or moan about it, or you can really lean in, embrace it, and understand how it can positively impact your business, which is exactly what we've done. And actually, we see it as a big sort of growth accelerator. It's going to fundamentally transform all businesses, right, over time. But at the moment, we can use AI to save lots of time and money and free up resource. But that becomes more of a growth accelerator. So, that point around having to create content on whatever platform, wherever consumers are, that requires a huge amount of resource and time. And if you use AI really smartly and you're always with humans involved, it does mean that you can have that capability to create the content in the way that people need to consume it at scale. But it also frees you up to go back to the art of editorial, actually, of storytelling. We've all become a bit hooked on that, cheap, thin sort of content that won in SEO, listicles and all of that stuff. So utilizing AI in workflows gives you more of an opportunity to be proper storytellers, to connect with people who are doing what they love, to spend more time with your communities. So that's really powerful. And also, specialist publishers have an enormous, rich archive. So what AI does is it allows you to utilize that archive in a way that just wasn't possible before, for people to really benefit from your brand. That's enormous for growth and for making our products and services better for our users.
And everybody sort of these days is worrying about their jobs in relation to the impact of AI. So we've had a question from Sally in Southampton, and she's basically said, people building a career in media today, what skills and mindset do you think they need? And do you think that AI is going to affect the opportunities down the line?
I think some of the jobs and the entry levels and things may change and adapt. I think in terms of mindset, there are some key things that I would say are really important. Adaptive mindset going into media, because it is constantly changing. The rapid pace of change now, if you're not that sort of person with that sort of mindset, then it's definitely not the right industry to go into. I would argue that media is very much about relationships and always has been. If you're on my side, on that sales side, on the creative side, those roles are just as important as they ever were and will continue to be, in terms of building relationships, coming up with incredible creative ideas, being able to sell them in, being able to get people excited, being able to negotiate. Like, all of those things are still there and still important. We can utilize AI to free up some of the boring bits of our jobs, but actually that means we just spend more time doing the fun bits. Like, why wouldn't we want to use AI to help with our reporting, so we can spend more time out with a client, understanding their business and challenges, and coming up with great solutions for them. So the biggest thing is the ability to be able to embrace change. And so, certain people find that much more exciting, and some people find it more difficult than others. So I would say that's what you need in this media day and age.
And it's very interesting because you're describing what it's like working in this environment, but I guess you've also got to be able to communicate it to your clients and agencies so that as you're learning about all this change, you're able to share that and to manage expectations. And I'm just interested to see whether you feel like the market is able to keep up with this pace of change, or it's incumbent on anybody working in the media environment to be able to really manage the change for people who might be more risk averse.
Yeah, definitely. And I think change is going on everywhere, right? It's going on at client side, it's going on at agency side. You think media owners have got, some challenges like it's totally getting disrupted, right? And I think the best relationships and the best work that gets done is when those three parties are really aligned and try and kind of look into the future together and try and say what are our unique skill sets and knowledge and abilities across those three kind of members in that relationship to try and get to a point where you're utilizing tools in the right way.
So you still think it's a good career to head off into?
Absolutely. Well,
just checking, Cath. Just checking.
Yeah. It's one of the best careers though. I feel like it's not gone out of fashion as much, but I do worry sometimes about, like, we've got an academy program that we set up a few years ago called I'm Direct, where we take first jobbers, people new to the industry in, and have a real good track record of kind of growing them and promoting them and moving them on into different teams. I think sometimes we get really bogged down with like the negativity or everything's changed, and you need to take a step back and really be proud of our industry and focus on like what makes it so great and what makes it great for a person starting out, and what it does for your development. You have to be able to think about things in a different way and really stretch yourself, really challenge yourself, which I'm not sure all industries do that nowadays. So yeah, I'm a big pro.
That brings us to our signature question, Cath. What has been your best yes?
Oh goodness, well, I knew this was coming because obviously I've listened to your fantastic podcast. If I had to pick one, would be when not long after I joined Magicalia, which was one of the precursor companies to what became Immediate back in 2010, and I came in to sort of help drive the digital growth there. We did this pitch for Heinz Baby on our parenting site, Made for Mums. We were kind of very much the sort of underdogs, the wild card. It was a massive partnership. Myself and my creative director worked like days and nights and put everything we had into it, and we created this incredible, exciting idea that was like integrated and a first and all of this stuff. And we went up against all these big massive players and we won it against sort of all odds, and it was a really big deal. It made a big difference to our business at the time. It went on to become a 5-year deal, 5-year renewal partnership, and it kind of laid the foundations for a lot of the work we do at Immediate in terms of how do you really push the boundary on creativity, how do you really try and see what's the art of the possible, like what's new, how can you come up with something that's different, but then that's going to really excite people and just nail that objective for them. And then how do you deliver the service that creates that into a year after year after year long renewal? And that's been the sort of bedrock of a lot of our success at Immediate in partnerships, particularly because that approach is quite a winning combo, and it's really fun to work in, right? Because it's really creative and it gives great customer service, and we call it a win-win-win, right? When everybody is aligned in the same way and working towards the same outcomes, that's what makes the job worthwhile and really good.
You never really get over that first yes, do you?
No.
The one that really makes a big difference, and that must have been an amazing win in a competitive space.
Today's Yes List recommendation is the famous book, Who Moved My Cheese, written back in 1998 by Dr. Spencer Johnson. Who Moved My Cheese is the ultimate playbook for thriving in media's relentless environment of change. The book's 4 characters, 2 mice and 2 little people, mirror exactly how we react when our cheese, whether that's our clients, their budgets, or even job security, disappears. The mice, well, they sniff out change early and they sprint towards new opportunities. But the humans, they resist, complain, then they finally adapt, but too late. For commercial media professionals, the lesson is brutal. Your cheese will move. Algorithms shift, budgets get cut, clients pivot overnight. So the winners will be those who can anticipate, test, and treat uncertainty as the new normal. So ask yourself, are you the mouse or the one still waiting for the cheese to come back? Spoiler, it won't.
Thanks for listening to It's a Yes, Making It in Media.
Do follow the show and share it with someone who's serious about getting results in their media career.
Send us your questions to hello@makingitinmedia.com.
We're running a live and interactive Zoom training workshop very soon. The links are in the show notes.